Grace and peace. Welcome to Judah's Roar Domestic Violence Awareness Initiative YouTube channel. I'm your host, Apostle Cheryl. Now, before we get started, I'm going to give you a couple of seconds. Check down here below the video. Make sure you subscribe if you've not done so already, and then click the bell to receive a notification each time we upload a new video on Sundays at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. Thank you so much for taking the time to do that. Also, don't forget to like this video and to share this video, even as you're viewing this video. Thanks. All right, this week we're going to be talking about when your child blames you, the victim. When your child blames the domestic violence victim. If you are a domestic violence victim or survivor, and you are also a parent, then more likely than not, one of your primary concerns is the health, safety, and welfare of your children, regardless of their ages. This may be difficult to hear, is that it's impossible for a child to be exposed to or witness or be subjected to directly domestic violence and to then leave that situation unscathed or unaffected. I'm going to say that again. It is impossible for a child to be exposed to witness or be directly the target of domestic violence and leave that situation unaffected or unscathed. It absolutely has an impact. Even if you're in a situation where you feel that the physical aggression and the arguing and all of that happens behind closed doors and the kids are in another room, they are still being impacted and affected by that, okay? And so that may be hard to hear, but it's important for you to realize that so that as you move forward making decisions about your own situation, you can take all of these things into consideration, all right? Now, all children are not the same. All children are not the same. As we've said in previous videos, some are more resilient and some are more sensitive. And for this reason, you may have several children living in the home, and they may all respond differently to the toxicity and to the psychological or emotional or financial or physical aggression that they are being exposed to on a fairly regular basis, okay? The age of the child is also a factor in terms of how their behaviors may manifest, their reactions to the toxicity in the home. A large part of our sense of well-being as human beings um, is our sense of personal safety and our sense of having the power to impact that safety and to ensure our safety. And so when children are in a home where domestic violence is taking place, it undermines that very basic need for a sense of safety. And it causes them to feel powerless, all right? Which is the effect that it has on the adult that's being, abused as well. But in children, they're not in a position where they can make a decision that's going to impact that situation, how long it exists or how long it will be tolerated. Children are at the mercy of the adults in the home when it comes to the duration and intensity, of the home environment. You might be thinking, well, my kids know that their father or mother is the abuser. They know that they're the one that tends to become violent and is emotionally abusive or is not supporting us financially, whatever. So why are they angry at me? Why are they blaming me? I'm the victim and they're taking it out on me. They're acting like it's my fault. And so we're going to take a look at that today. Whenever we're confronted with violence of any type, we almost automatically make a threat assessment, right? We kind of survey the situation. We make a determination about how much danger we're in. We make a determination about what we may be able to do about it. What are our real options in terms of curbing this violence, curbing the threat, disarming the threat. And this is something that happens pretty much automatically. Now, the conclusion that we arrived at after we make this threat assessment will determine what we feel we can do next. How much power do we have to stabilize the situation and to restore our sense of safety? Can we mitigate this threat? Can we diminish it somehow? Can we restore our own sense of power and control over what is happening to us in our life? Okay. And so, in a domestic violence situation, children are faced with the same thing, but they don't have any power to directly do anything about it. And this can increase their sense of powerlessness. Um, some kids will recognize that the abuser's actions are wrong, that they are hurtful, that they are over the top. Um, and they may align themselves with the victim. They may feel protective of the victim and seek to be supportive. They may even stand up to the abuser from time to time in defense of the victim and risking punishment or severe consequences for doing so. Some kids may recognize that the abuser is wrong, but become overwhelmed with anxiety and fear, um, and so respond by withdrawing, retreating, um, trying to make themselves invisible in the hopes that they can avoid violence, they can avoid the threat, um, and escape the anger of the abuser. Other kids may blame the victim. And this may be because they are wondering, why doesn't the victim do something about this? Well, what do you mean, do something? Well, why don't they just give the abuser what they want? Then all of this would stop. Or why don't we just leave? Why do they keep putting up with this and exposing us to all of this violence and this toxicity? And so a child may be wondering why the victim appears to just be kind of acquiescing and going along with whatever the abuser is demanding. Or they might be upset because the victim hasn't decided to leave, thereby leaving everyone in a situation where they're exposed to the whims of the abuser. Or if they're not going to leave, why won't the victim stand up for themselves? Why don't they talk back? Why don't they stand toe to toe and hold their ground and protect us as children? So these are some of the things that a child might be struggling with. And if they struggle with that, it's not unusual for them to then blame the victim because they feel that the victim has the power. What they're clear about is that as a child, they don't have the power, but the adults have the power. And if an adult that they perceive has the power doesn't, in their perception, utilize that power to make things right, utilize that power to protect them as children, then it can cause them to become angry and resentful. And as I said, a lot of times kids can become upset because they can see that you need to leave and they don't understand why you're not leaving. They don't understand the financial ramifications, the safety ramifications, the practical needs, in terms of leaving, getting your belongings out of the house, being able to do so safely, having somewhere to go, being able to find work if you're not already working. They're children. So they're not thinking about all of that. They just think that as a parent, you should be able to do something about whatever is causing them pain or discomfort. Now, we know that trauma literally rewires the brain. And one of the impacts of trauma bonding is this need that the victim has, adult or child, to have the approval and acceptance of the abuser. And so this is a natural offshoot of trauma bonding. The need for the acceptance and approval and for things to calm down with the abuser. This trauma bonding can be a factor in a child choosing to align themselves with the abuser who may be clearly wrong, clearly abusive, clearly mean, clearly passive aggressive, clearly violent, all of these things, clearly the instigator of the discord in the home. A child may see that and recognize that and yet choose to align themselves with the abuser because the abuser appears to be the entity in the home with all of the power. When they say something, things change. When they put their foot down, they appear to get their way, no matter what. So if you align yourself with the person that appears to have the most power in a situation, then you feel less vulnerable and you may feel, in this case, a false sense of protection. And so then when the chaos does break out in the home, when the chaos does surface, when you hit that point in the domestic violence abuse cycle where there's this explosion of inappropriate behaviors and language, et cetera, and the abuse escalates, then the child can feel less vulnerable because they've aligned themselves and kind of made friends with the abuser, the person with the power. They've made peace with the bully, okay? And that can increase their own sense of personal safety. Unfortunately, one of the ramifications is that what the child is learning, in some cases, some children may take it this way, what they're learning is that the best way to feel safe and the best way to feel in control is by exerting power and control over others. A child can learn in a domestic violence situation that the best way to maintain a feeling of safety and control over what's happening to you in your life is to exert power and control over others, to take power and exert control over others. And this can very well translate into becoming disrespectful and abusive to the parent that's the victim. Because again, if I'm disrespecting you and they're disrespecting you, I'm aligning myself with them, then whatever I'm doing to you, whatever I'm saying to you, they approve of. So I'm going to be disrespectful to you, and hopefully that'll keep me in good standing with the abuser. Now, these are not things that happen on a conscious, I'm going to sit down and plan this out kind of thing. This is almost an automatic response, and it depends on how the child processes things, if they're more resilient or if they're more sensitive, which route they will take. But the reality of it is that once we're confronted with a challenge, we have to make a decision internally about how big of a threat is it to me? How much control do I have over this? How can I gain control over this? And how can I ensure my safety emotionally and physically? Once the problem is launched, those decisions have to be made, okay? And there's no getting around it. We have to make a decision. Even if we decide to do nothing, what we've decided in that moment is doing nothing is the safest thing for us to do, okay? The other thing is that with a child's expectation that their parent will keep them safe and protect them, if that expectation is not being met, it can cause anger because they feel, well, this is your job. This is your responsibility. You're supposed to keep me safe. You're supposed to do something if someone is hurting me. You're not doing what I think you should do. You are choosing to stay. You're staying and you're not doing what they want you to do. And so it makes everything worse. And you're not protecting us. And you're allowing the abuser to be physically aggressive with you, and you're not fighting back. And so A child can process this as the victim being weak. And what effect does that have on them later in life? Well, if it's a boy, it can really cause them to not have much respect for women, to view them as weaker, to view them as possessions, and to view them as entities that should simply just do what they're told, and shouldn't have an opinion. And if it's a girl, then she may think that that's how she's supposed to be treated, and that's how things are supposed to go. And she may very well confuse abuse with an indicator that um, a young man cares, or loves her. Okay, so it can really distort their perspective in terms of relationships moving forward. Now, the purpose of this video is to bring your attention to the possible catalysts for your child's behavior. If they are cutting up, if they are acting up, um, to raise some things for you to think about regarding what may be the cause of that. And so often in life, the reason that the challenges that we are confronted with seem insurmountable at first blush is because the why eludes us. We don't know why a thing is happening, and it makes it hard for us to process. It makes it difficult for us to see our way out. And in some cases, it can make it difficult for us to even understand that there is a way out. When we don't understand why, it limits our ability to identify real solutions to the challenge that we're being confronted with. And so hopefully this video will provide you with some answers to the question why regarding your children's behavior, if you all are dealing with domestic violence. Because our perception or understanding of our why informs what we believe our options are, it's important that we grasp as best we can why they're behaving the way they're behaving. And so hopefully this video will help you with that. So if what we have shared so far rings true in terms of how your children are responding, how they're behaving, whether they're blaming you or withdrawing or aligning with the abuser and becoming disrespectful and abusive to you, you're probably wondering, okay, that sounds like what's happening at my address, but what can I do about it? And that's a legitimate question. So here we go. First, understand that healing from trauma cannot occur if the trauma is ongoing. This is true for adults. This is true for children. This is true for humans in general. You cannot heal from a thing that is continuing to happen to you, okay? So with that in mind, consider if leaving the situation would help you yourself and your children to feel more safe. It's a personal decision, but consider it, okay? If your child is being disrespectful, this is a tall order, but try not to take it personally. That doesn't mean that you should go along with it, you should accept it, or you should co-sign it. What I want you to do is to understand where it's coming from, and that will help you to deal with it in a more even manner, if you can understand why. If you know that it's something that's happening within them, just pretty much automatically, that all they're really trying to do is to feel safe and in control, and powerful, because they view the way that you're processing it and the way that you're handling it, they don't feel safe necessarily. Okay. And so they're not trying to do anything to you, they're trying to protect themselves. That's the bottom line. Okay. The other thing is, understand that whatever their response is, whether they are angry and belligerent, whether they are withdrawn and quiet, whether they are anxious, however they're responding, whether they align themselves with the abuser and challenge your authority, that they really are only trying to feel safe themselves, okay? Get them into counseling with someone who is skilled in domestic violence counseling. Um, Find a young people support group for them, for victims of domestic violence. Get yourself into counseling. Find yourself a support group. Continue to educate yourself about domestic violence. Be intentional about remaining as calm and as even tempered as possible. You have to set your intention to respond in a calm manner when your children are acting out or displaying these behaviors. Why do I say that? Because responding in an aggressive manner, an overexcited manner, will only reinforce the abuser's narrative, and it will reinforce the idea that a disrespectful child already has. It'll reinforce the thought that this is how you get control. You become belligerent and then you take control and you get your way. And so you can't behave that way and extinguish that behavior in the child at the same time. If you do decide to leave, please, please, please do so after you've developed a safety plan with the domestic violence advocate who can look at it and help you to cover things that maybe you hadn't thought about. Okay. Um, and if you do decide to leave, this is critically important. Be truthful with yourself about where your children are emotionally. Take into consideration their ages, take into consideration if they have aligned with the abuser, and use wisdom regarding discussing your exit plans with your children. I can tell you from when I was growing up that once my mother decided to leave us because things had gotten so bad at home, she spoke with our pastor. This was many, many years ago. And he told her she needed to get out of there. Now, I'm going to tell you, back then, they didn't tell you that. Back then, they told you to stay, stand by your man, deal with it, pray more, fast more, whatever. He told her, you really need to get out of there. It's getting dangerous. And so when she made that plan, she came to me 2 days before. And she told me. And at that time, it was myself and my younger sister, and we're less than 2 years apart. But I was the one that would stand up to my father, and I was the one that would protect her. I was fiercely protective of my mother. And at the same time, I was close to my father. But she told me, and she told me not to tell my younger sister because she might tell daddy. And so even then, she recognized that we had two different temperaments and we handled this trauma in different ways. And I was more outspoken and kind of standing up and protecting her and, staying around her a lot to make sure she was safe. And my sister would become overwhelmed. She would feel overwhelmed and she would just kind of get quiet and anxious. And so my mother shared that her plan to exit with me and not with my younger sister. So what I'm saying to you is, don't tell all of your children if all of your children can't handle knowing it. If they are too close to the abuser, they may tell. Even if they're not close to the abuser, they may be manipulated into telling if the abuser is to question them or whatever. So use wisdom regarding how much you tell them and how far in advance you tell them, because it can torpedo your entire plan if they slip up either deliberately or completely by accident. Say something that informs the abuser that you're planning to exit. Okay. And so you know your children. You know your children. And so govern yourself accordingly. Okay. What have we been talking about? We've been talking about what if your child blames you? What if he blames you? What if she blames you? What can you do about that? It's very hurtful for sure. It may even be disappointing. Try not to take it personally. Get them into counseling. Get yourself into counseling. Find support groups for both of you. Um, Reach out to your local shelter. They have resources available to you. Consider leaving. Develop a safety plan with a DV advocate. Stay connected to other resources. Continue to educate yourself. But the most important thing that we wanted you to know from this video is to understand the why, because understanding the why of your children's behavior will help you to use wisdom and make level-headed decisions about how best to proceed. This is Apostle Cheryl with Judas for Domestic Violence Awareness Initiative. I hope that this video has been helpful to you. You be safe out there. Blessings to you.